Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Sunday night video. This week I am covering the strange story of James Craigie and the attempted murder of his father John, which took place in Wallsend in 1909. Now, it is a little different to my normal stories, but I do hope that you will still find it interesting. But before we begin, can I just say, if you do enjoy this video, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new here or haven't already done so, then do please consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. Thank you. It is completely free to subscribe. It doesn't cost you any money at all, but it really does help to support the channel. And I would just like to add, as I always do now, that I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always try to rectify, so I hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. James Craigie was born in Wallsend in around 1890 to parents John and Elizabeth, and he was one of at least 5 children. In 1909, he was working as an apprentice driller at the local shipyard. Now, although the details were not given, it is possible that he either worked at Swan Hunters or that he worked at one of the shipyards in Howden. John Craigie, the intended victim, was born in Scotland in around 1865 to parents John and Isabella. John had married Elizabeth in around 1888. Now, it's not clear when the couple moved to Wallsend, but in 1909, John lived in Laurel Street in Wallsend with several of his children. Sadly, Elizabeth had died in 1908 and John was now a widow. And John worked as a carpenter and he worked at a shipyard in Howden. On the night of April the 5th, Elizabeth Craigie was returning home to Laurel Street when she found her brother James standing at the front door. She went past him and went inside, and a few moments later she heard a noise coming from the passage. She went to look and found her father in the passage near the door, and James now standing outside on the footpath. She watched as he took a revolver out of his pocket, pointed it into the passage and fired it towards her father. She rushed outside and pushed James off the footpath, and he then hit her on the head with the revolver. Luckily, she wasn't hurt, and she ran to the nearby police station. Now, strangely, it would seem that the police did not come to the house until the following morning, as it was stated that James was found at home at 7:30 a.m. and was taken into custody on a charge of attempted murder. The first hearing was held at the Wallsend Police Courts on April the 6th. Now, the police courts at the time were in part of the newly built Wallsend Town Hall, and the building is still there today, and the sign for the police courts can still be seen above the door. However, it has not been used as police courts for many years now. PC Oliver said he had gone to the house in Laurel Street and arrested James Craigie. He said his father was also in bed asleep at the time. When charged, he said that James had said, "I did not mean to murder him. I was in a bad temper at the time." Sergeant Pringle then asked that James should be remanded for 1 week for evidence to be gathered, and this was granted. On April the 13th, 1909, James once again appeared at the Wallsend Police Courts. He pleaded not guilty to the charge, and he also added that he had not aimed a gun at his father or anyone else for that matter. Elizabeth Craigie said, sorry, I paused there because I'd actually put her middle name instead of her surname. Elizabeth Craigie said that James was her brother and that she lived with him and other family members in Laurel Street in Wallsend. She spoke again of the night of the incident, as has already been earlier discussed. She said, to the best of her knowledge, her brother had only fired 1 shot at her father. Many of the newspapers at the time had reported that he had fired twice. She said earlier in the day of April the 5th she had been arguing with James. However, she did not say what they had argued about. She said at one point she had threatened to shoot him. She said she had also thrown one of her boots at him, which had hit him on the head. She was then asked why she had done this, and she replied saying that James had thrown the poker at her. It had missed and struck the wall. She said after she had thrown the boot at James, he had chased her out into the street and threatened to kill her. She said she did not believe that James had been drinking at the time that he had tried to shoot her father, but she said earlier the same day she had had to leave the house with her younger sister and younger brother because of his bad behaviour, and she did not return until her father came home from work. She said they had gone to a neighbour's house and James had threatened them again, and this, it seems, was after she had thrown her boot at James. She was then asked what she knew about the revolver and said it was kept in a box in the house, it was not locked and it was easy to get hold of. She also added that when her father had found out about it, he had shouted at James and told him to get rid of it. She said James had replied, "Shout a bit louder and I will put one across you." She ended by saying that she had found the gun on the morning of April the 6th under James's pillow and she had given it to the police. John Craigie said James was his son. He said on April the 5th he had met James in the street. He said James had spoken to him about turning the family out of the house, although he did not explain why. He said he and James had scuffled with each other at the door and he had found a stick, most likely a walking stick, close to the door and he had hit James with it. He said he was in the passage at the time and James was at the door and there was not much distance between them. He said he did not see a revolver in his son's hand, but he did hear the sound of a gunshot and saw a flash of light. After this, he said his son ran off and he did not see him again that night. However, he said when he woke the following morning, James was asleep in the bed beside him. When asked, he said he did not believe his son had intended to kill him. In fact, he did not think he'd intended to hurt him at all. He believed he was just using the gun to try and frighten him. He said he had fired above his head and the bullet had struck the wall. He added that he had been aware for some time that James kept the revolver in the house and that he had asked him to get rid of it around about a month ago. Thomas Craigie, who was 18 years old, said James was his brother, and he said on the night of April the 5th he had seen his brother take the revolver out of his pocket and fire a shot above his father's head. When asked, he said he thought James might have threatened his father that night, but he was not sure, and he could not remember James ever making any threats towards his father in the past. John Craigie Jr. said he was 12 years old, and he said that James was his brother, and he lived with him and the rest of the family in Laurel Street in Wallsend. He said on the morning of April the 5th he had been in the house with James when he had pulled a revolver out of his pocket and threatened to shoot him with it if he did not leave the house. Susanna Craigie said James was her brother, and she said that she had had to leave the house in Laurel Street on the morning of April the 5th with John Jr. and Elizabeth. She said James had threatened to shoot them all if they did not leave the house. P.C. Oliver said when he went to the house he found James in bed, and he was told that he was wanted by the police and also why, and James had said, "All right, I will be with you in a minute." P.C. Oliver said he did not seem to be too concerned. Sergeant Pringle then produced the gun and stated that the one shot had been fired from this gun, and he said it was in the wall at the house and it was at a height of some 9.5 feet, well above the height of John Craigie. James, it appears, did not give any evidence on his own behalf. The defence for James then spoke to the magistrate, stating that he did not feel there was any evidence to show any intent to murder John Craigie, and he felt this was a case where James should be bound over to be of good conduct in future. However, the magistrates decided to place him on a further remand with a view to sending him to trial. And this, it seems, is what happened at the next hearing. However, I did not find any details about this following hearing. James would eventually appear at the Moot Hall in June of 1909 on the charge of attempted murder. However, there would be no trial, as he pleaded guilty to common assault against his father by shooting him, and he was bound over. Now you do at this point have to wonder why the magistrates at the earlier hearings did not do this themselves, as it seems sending him to trial was a waste of time when he was given the same sentence as the defence had wanted for him in April. In 1910, James married a lady by the name of Mary, and by 1911, the couple were living in West Street in Wallsend with their 2 young children. I did not find any further reports of any incidents between James and his family after the one in 1909. And James would later join the army during World War I, and he died in September of 1918, and he is buried in France. Now, I did not really look into the rest of the family after 1909, but it has to be hoped that they had a much more settled life after James had married and moved out of his own home. This was a very odd case. I felt that the evidence from the brothers and sisters all suggested that James was angry and violent towards them, wanting them to leave the house, although no reason was ever given. And it also seems that his sister Elizabeth really did not get on with him at all, and she herself had actually threatened to shoot him. So it seems that the family life was not a peaceful one at all, but there are no clear reasons why it seems to be so bad. However, his father John did not seem to take the same view of his son, suggesting that he would never have hurt him and was only trying to frighten him. And to be honest, he doesn't really seem to have been frightened at all, seeing as after the shooting incident he simply went to bed and was not shocked to find his son in bed with him the following morning. To me, there does seem to be more to this case than meets the eye. Why did James want his family out of the house? It was not stated that this was his home, so he had no right to make them leave, unless, of course, he was the one paying the bills, although at no time does anyone suggest that his father is not taking care of his family. But perhaps James was the one paying for the family, and with a girlfriend with a baby on the way, maybe he no longer wanted the responsibility of the rest of his own family. And as he fired well above his father's head, it doesn't seem that he did intend to kill him. But, as he said himself, he was in a temper at the time, so the fact that he missed may have simply been because he fired quickly while blinded by rage, and it was just pure luck that he actually didn't hit his father. I do think, though, that the fact that he even fired towards his father should have met with more punishment than simply being bound over. In truth, this story has me completely baffled, and one of the reasons that I wanted to cover it was because I wanted to know what everyone else thought. So, what do you think? Do you think that James did intend to kill John? Do you think he was maybe taking care of the family and was fed up now that he had his own responsibilities? Do you think there was more to the story than was told, something the family did not disclose at the court hearing? Or do you think this was a foolish boy shooting at his father in a moment of anger, and that he was lucky that he shot too high and missed him? Do please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do hope that you have found this very strange story of people of the past interesting. I know, as I said earlier, it is somewhat different to the normal kind of stories that I do cover, but as I have said in the past, the Sunday night videos can be about very many things, such as cases like this, or history stories, stories about people, etc., etc. But anyway, I'm not going to go back into all of that again. Anyway, I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.